Hello, you've tuned to this week's episode of Next Steps Forward, and I'm your host, Chris Meek. As always, it's an honor to have you with us. Next Steps Forward is committing helping others achieve more than ever while experiencing greater personal empowerment and well being. My very special guest today is Dr. Zach Mercurio. Dr. Mercurio, who earned a PhD in organizational learning, performance, and change from Colorado State University, believes one of the greatest human needs is not simply to be successful, but to know that we matter. Zach is a researcher, speaker, and author whose work focuses on purposeful leadership, meaningful work, and the science of helping people feel seen, heard, valued, and needed. His latest book, The Power of Mattering, explores how leaders, families, educators, and communities can create cultures where people thrive because they know they make a difference. Today, we'll share why mattering matters, how purpose shapes our lives, and what each of us can do to help others feel they truly belong. Dr. Zach Mercurio, welcome to Next Steps Forward.
Thank you, Chris. I'm really excited to be here.
Now, thrilled to have you. And again, I'll apologize on the air for having to reschedule you earlier this year. So I appreciate your flexibility and time. Great to be here. And that was a tongue twister I had to say where I just say, today we'll share why mattering matters. So I'm really looking forward to this because it's a very interesting concept. And a lot of this stuff, I just really resonated in terms of thinking through things. But your work is so thorough and deliberate. But I understand it was also influenced by a conversation with, of all people, a taxi driver in Washington, D.C. First off, is that really true? And second, what on earth did a taxi driver say to you that was so compelling?
It is true. I was at a parking lot at Gravelly Point State Park outside of Reagan National Airport where you can see the planes come and go. It was on a lunch break from my digital advertising sales job, which I was really good at in my first career, I would say. But I was miserable. And the people around me, were talking about what they did last weekend or what they were doing the weekend coming up. And I was astounded at how many people lived for 2/7 of their lives. The people that I talked with, the people around me, right? How many people just got through 5/7 of their lives? And then also just how the toll that took on them. And I saw that. I couldn't unsee that. So that's the context. But I was in this parking lot and I was actually taking a lunch break because in those days, I say in those days, I'm not that old, but in those days, sales meant driving around. I mean, I had to drive around and meet with people in person. And I was taking a lunch break in a parking lot. Cab driver pulls up next to me. He gets out of his cab. He's smoking a cigarette, leaning against the cab. He goes, "How's it going?" And I just said, "Oh, is it the weekend yet?" I had ended up sounding like everybody else. It was like a Tuesday at the time, and I was embarrassed. And then so I was like, "How are you?" He started going on and on and on and on and on about the people he had picked up that day. And one thing he said to me is he said, I've realized when people fly in here, like if they're from another country, like I'm their first experience they have with this country. And he started talking to me. He's like, I'm people's friends they don't talk to anymore. I'm their new friends. I'm their parents they miss. And he went on and on. And dude, I had this moment where like he didn't talk to me about what he did at all. He was joyful and had a lot of energy because of why he did it and who he did it for.
That's fascinating. I wouldn't think, his perspective of being like the first interaction with somebody in America.
Yeah. And that what we've come to find in our research, right, is that's a form of what's called cognitive job crafting, where you can see the impact of what you're doing while you're doing it. I'll give one quick example because that encounter led me to say, gosh, how do we find that? Like, how do we do that? How do we develop that perspective? Because other people I talk to as well, and you can do this experiment yourself, go find the most joyful people you see every day and ask them about their day. And I will guarantee that they will talk more about who they impact and how they add value through what they do than what they do. And we see that time and time again. And, one quick example is the other example that led me to this podcast is I was in my first research study as a PhD student because I wanted to know as much as I could about this perspective. And we were studying janitors. So we embedded ourselves with a group of janitors and we wanted to know how people in difficult frontline work come to experience meaningfulness. Well, there was this one janitor who I said, "Hey, what's the most meaningful part of your job?" And she proceeded to tell me. She goes, "Zach, it's Monday morning when I come into these dormitories and I'm cleaning these bathrooms." This sounds gross, right? And I was not a good interviewer at the time. And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And she said, "Oh, it's the part of my job I hate the most. But every time I go into that bathroom, I say to myself, I'm cleaning this bathroom so that these kids don't get sick. So what we've come to find is that the most fulfilled, energized people, the people who have sustained energy and resilience, they tend to have this so that mentality. They don't forget who they're doing it for, who they're doing the work for. What is your so that? And so that's that. It's funny how that research study confirmed what I had seen in my informal conversation with that cab driver, which put everything together and has led me to what I'm doing.
I mean, these are fascinating little 2-word snippets you're putting together, like the so that and if so. Back to the cab driver. Did you realize the time that you were having one of those conversations that would have such an impact on you? Like, was that your aha moment, or did it come later on?
Well, I think it was the stark contrast of what I was experiencing in my office and amongst my friends to being out in this parking lot with this guy who I would assume would not like his job. It seems like a difficult job. It's hard to make money. And I was making money, but I was miserable. And here was this guy who was joyful. So I think the contrast of that was really hard not to ignore, because I was like, whoa, why? I mean, I'm helping people, human beings who are developing and starting their businesses and putting a lot of money and time into what they're doing, who have kids, who have lives as interesting, as vivid and complex as my own. I'm helping them. Why don't I see it that way? And one of the reasons why we don't see it that way is we tend to get rewarded as we grow up, as we go to work, on what we acquire and what we achieve, not on how we contribute. I mean, we're taught really to chase what we get and not what we give as success. And so these things kind of came together, and it wasn't, at that moment, it just gave me like, whoa, there's this whole alternative perspective. There's this whole alternative way of being in the world. And that's what sparked my interest.
I feel like this is turning into like a psychology or sociology class. Like this is fascinating. And also, I know we're getting into it later, but when you started the conversation, you immediately talked about 2/7 of our lives and 5/7 of our lives. And I never thought of it that way, but I mean, you could literally drill it down to something as simple as sevenths.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we spend, it's really our waking life. People spend about a third of their waking life at work over the course of their life, a third of when they're awake. And to think that it's somehow psychologically healthy to just trudge through and acquire and achieve as much as you can within that 1/3 of your life explains a lot of what we see today when it comes to our nation's mental health.
Well, I'll take it one step more granular for you. So prior to COVID, or actually, I guess right when COVID started. So I live in Connecticut, would commute to Manhattan every day, roughly 3.5 hours a day, 5 days a week. And I had done that for roughly 20 years when COVID hit. I did the math, and it was something like 5.5 years. So if you sat in a train for 24 hours a day for 5.5 years, that's what I had done commuting to New York. 5.5 might be a little high, but it was definitely at least 3 or 4 years, but just nonstop, sitting on a train 24 hours a day, 365 for 4 straight years.
Wow.
Like that, and to your point, like sevens, it's that similar thing. Like there's a lot of things that we take for granted, or we just don't think about, or we could be missing out and doing other things.
Yeah. And I would say not only enjoying other things, some of my research with frontline workers who don't have much of a choice. I mean, 80% of the workforce doesn't have an office. They're frontline service workers, many of whom don't have a choice in their career based on life situation, socioeconomic status. What I've learned from studying people in those positions is that meaning is not necessarily found somewhere else. It's usually made right where you are based on what you focus on and the relationships that you have. One of the things that we found is that experiencing meaningfulness has much less to do with what you're doing and much more to do with how you think about what you're doing and who you're doing it with and how you're relating to them. And in turn, we can develop that perspective, but as some of my later work has shown, that we have to create that perspective for others. We have to create an environment that reminds other people of the evidence of their significance in relationships. So they start believing in that, hey, yeah, I may be on a train right now, but what I say to the person next to me could literally keep them going today or not. Like that one connection. And, coming to believe that, but then coming to show other that's really what this idea of what it means to matter and to experience mattering, to approach life with a mattering mindset is about.
Prior to that lunch you had outside of Reagan, did you ever see yourself going from a social media ads guy to somebody who's now philosophical in terms of like why your life matters and how, and like you just said, that one conversation you have with somebody on that train or that bus or in line at Starbucks or wherever it may be could change their life for the better? You ever think, I mean, it's surreal.
Yeah, it is surreal, but it also like was incremental. It didn't. I was the youngest of three, so when you're the youngest of three, I have two older brothers. When you're the youngest, you learn to entertain yourself and compare yourself. So I was always like curious, but I was also being like, what are my brothers doing? Why are they doing that? Why are they getting this job? Why are they doing that? So I always had this natural like one of my first degrees, one of my first degree plans as an undergraduate was in philosophy, ironically enough. So I always had this natural like questioning. I couldn't let things go once I saw it. And I think so that I think was infused in how I responded to those situations. But yeah, I'm still astounded now. I mean, 20 years later, I'm still astounded at really the power of the right thing said at the right time by the right person to the right person, how that can dramatically alter people's lives. And I mean, when you look at research on whether it's talented musicians or artists and people who become teachers or police officers, you look at people from CEOs to accountants and janitors, it's these small moments of mattering that where someone sees us, hears us, reminds us of a strength we didn't know we had, reminds us that we're needed, that really when you pinpoint it are these pivotal moments that nudge us to where we are. And we're recipients of those things, but we also create those for others. But yeah, I've been astounded ever since that moment at the power of small moments to completely alter the trajectory of ours and other people's lives. And, you know, I work a lot in organizations with big organizations. And I always say to them, you know, your culture, your organizational culture really is just the accumulation of small interactions every day. And many of us, we give up our power by focusing on the big plans we have for our lives, or if you're an organization, focusing on big strategic initiatives and big values and mission statements and life plans. And what happens is that we tend to undervalue and underfocus on the everyday interactions that actually create the reality we say we want.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that there's those small interactions and those everyday brief interactions. There's an article in the Wall Street Journal last week on a study done on one of the most important parts of your day is having that small banter at the water cooler or the coffee machine or whatever. Just those small interactions, those short, brief conversations are something that are extremely stimulating mentally, personally, and just that human engagement, which, you know, we all know we missed during COVID. And now we're all sort of finally getting back to that with, you know, return to work is pretty much full throttle right now. So like what you're saying is it's just unbelievably fascinating to me. And my producer, Eric, is going to be so upset with me because I'm going way off script, which is fine because it's a better conversation anyway. But if I don't ask enough of his questions, he gets mad at me. So Eric, I know you're in the car driving back from Wisconsin right now, so I'm getting back on script. So, you know, the question whether our lives matter and whether we're making a difference in the lives of others eventually became the foundation of your book, The Power of Mattering. So let's start with the basics. What is mattering and why does it matter?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, you wouldn't be listening right now. You wouldn't be alive listening right now if at some point you hadn't mattered enough to another human being in your life so that person would keep you alive. So the first thing we do as human beings is we reach out for significance. We have to become important to somebody else for our survival. So to matter, to be important is a survival instinct. Now, just like other survival instincts, the survival instinct to matter, as we grow up, as we go to school, as we go to work, as we have families, it turns into the fundamental need to feel seen, heard, valued, and needed by those around us. And when that need is met, we experience what's called mattering. Mattering is the experience of feeling significant to others that comes from two primary experiences: feeling valued by them, but then also knowing how we add value to their lives. Mattering is different from other things like belonging. Belonging is being part of something, or inclusion. Inclusion is being invited to contribute to something. Mattering is feeling that something wouldn't be complete without you. So I always say, like, belonging is being picked for the team. Inclusion is being asked to play in the game. Mattering is feeling that the team wouldn't be complete without you. It's feeling seen, heard, valued, and needed and important to those around you, knowing how you add value. And because it's the first thing we do as people, it also comes before a lot of what we say we want in our lives and in our organizations and communities. Like if we want people to contribute, they first have to believe they're worthy of contributing. If we want people to use their strengths and talents, they first have to believe that they have them. If we want people to share their voice and their ideas and their innovative ideas, they first have to believe that their voices are significant. And as you mentioned, like today, the quality of our interpersonal interactions have decayed, which is making that experience of feeling significant, which is really the prerequisite for all human behavior, less and less common. And that's why I argue that we're facing a mattering deficit. But that's why mattering matters, and that's what mattering is. It's that experience of feeling significant to those around you that comes from feeling valued and knowing how you add value.
And you clearly said that phrase more times than I have. That's why mattering matters, because you didn't trip over your tongue like I have the 3 times I've said it so far. Why do
I tend to do trip over it, because a lot of people say to me, Zach, like mattering's not even a word. And I was like, well, belonging wasn't a word either.
Now there was Googling.
So to belong, and then we experience belonging. That's common. But there's been something missing where, that feeling where maybe you're in a room full of people or it's friends even, but you feel like no one really knows what you're going through. You can be around a lot of people and feel invisible. That's the experience of not mattering, not feeling that sense of significance. And it gnaws at you because it's a survival instinct, just like it's an instinct to sleep or eat. Like we have to experience that, which is why not experiencing it is so detrimental and why experiencing it is so powerful.
Why do human beings have such a powerful desire to matter?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's a survival instinct. I mean, think about this. I mean, you wouldn't have done much of anything today if you didn't believe at some small level that your life was worthy of your energy. We're almost like designed to matter. Like you wouldn't get up and eat anything and have coffee, go to work. You wouldn't do anything if you didn't believe that at some small level, what you did today made a difference. And by saying made a difference, you're saying make a difference to others, because without the other, there's no possibility of making a difference. So we to matter is really the animator of human behavior.
So let's take the other side of that. Is the desire to matter a weakness, or is it one of the most beautiful aspects of being human?
Yeah, some people say to me, Zach, well, is if I show people that they matter, am I coddling them? Like, or this is why we have so many entitled people who need a participation trophy. Like, I get a lot of that. It's important to recognize, like, coddling is overprotecting people from challenge. Showing people how they matter, experiencing mattering, is knowing that you're worthy and capable of taking on challenges. Right? It's having that secure base. It's like confidence. We don't develop confidence by sitting in our offices or rooms and reading self-help books and chanting self-affirmations to ourselves, right? Psychologically, we develop confidence when we know someone has our back. Whether we're a kid with a parent who loves us no matter what, whether we're a kid with a coach who lets us go try new things on the sports field, and we know that we matter to that person because we can experiment, take risks, learn, try, and we know someone has our back. Whether we're learning a new project at work, right? We become confident. We develop a sense of self through having that secure base with others. And when that secure base isn't there, we tend to falter. So it is, again, it's that primal instinct. It is something you can't escape as people. And when we experience it, we're able to go out and do really amazing things.
We've all heard the old saying, it's better to give than to receive. Does giving to others make us feel that we matter more than when we're receiving from others?
So the mattering begets mattering, meaning if you're ever feeling like low confidence, or you're sensing that, oh gosh, like is what I'm doing mattering? Does what I do matter? I always say, just go have a conversation with your grocery store clerk and force yourself, like call them by their name that's on their name tag and say, hey, thank you for being here like today. I know, life's difficult. It's a difficult job. I just wanted to thank you. Watch what happens to them, and then watch what happens to you. Some of the research on the power of these interactions is that when we do this for others, we actually we're crafting an environment around us that shows us the evidence of our significance. Because to develop any belief, we have to get evidence in our environment that confirms that belief. or does not confirm it, to lose the belief. So if you want to believe in yourself, like a lot of people say, believe in yourself, you have to have evidence in your environment that reminds you that you're enough, that you're capable, that you make an impact. So many people, when they start feeling like they don't matter, they withdraw, they isolate, they protect, they look inward, which research shows is the opposite thing we need. So forcing yourself to go out and um, to to talk to people, to show people how they matter, so you can see how you matter through their reactions. You can see the downstream impact that you have is very powerful. It's like the boomerang effect. It's like if you one of the best ways to remember how you matter is to show someone else how they matter.
And my head is spinning right now of all these different things I've come across. So I'm not a big social media guy, but last week something hit, it must have been my X feed, where it was How to Be a Gentleman was the title. And there's this very distinguished, dapper, late 60s, early 70s gentleman on the bow of a boat somewhere in the Caribbean or off the Amalfi Coast. And the one example he gave was, when someone says thank you, don't say you're welcome. Make them feel important. Say, it was my pleasure, or the pleasure was mine.
Yeah.
And so as you're talking about make somebody feel like they matter, like all of a sudden I'm thinking back to this guy who I've never seen him before in my life. I don't know how he hit my X feed, but it was just, to your point, it's that simple nuance. Again, back to sociology. How do we change the language? So you're making them, you're elevating them as opposed to yourself. You're not making yourself feel good for helping somebody.
Right.
By saying you're welcome.
Yeah.
It's the opposite. You're making them matter, saying it was my pleasure to help you.
Yeah. And interestingly, our relationships, research shows, become better when we do this. There's this norm that's pretty much held all human societies together. It's called the norm of reciprocity. Basically, it says, like, when someone gives a kindness, that kindness, it's a social expectation that kindness is returned. But what we don't necessarily understand is someone has to go first. Right? Someone has to start the act of kindness. And it's not just kindness. It could be an act of building trust. It could be an act of valuing somebody, of showing gratitude for somebody. Some people say to me, again, I do a lot of my work in the workplace. Some people say to me, Zach, what if my leader doesn't do this for me? And I always say, do you do it for them? Right? Do you check in on them? Do you thank them? Do you show them the difference that they make? Right? This is non-directional stuff. There's no power differential here with mattering. It's created through everyday interactions. So, choosing to go first, even when sometimes you don't feel that it's warranted, can help create that upward spiral and create the relationships you say you want, but also create the culture and community that you say you want.
Upward spiral. I like that. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, it's like this build approach. Like, actually, because oftentimes when we experience negative emotions, we go into survival mode. So like cardiovascular system increases, you go into self-protection mode. It's very hard for someone to thrive and be in a state of fear at the same time. And so this idea of the upward spiral is that when we look outward, when we cultivate relationships, we actually broaden our perspective. We turn outward. There's more possibilities. We experience more energy than when we turn inward. But a lot of us, including myself, and I teach what I need to hear the most, we don't even realize it's happening. And so we just kind of like go inward, and forget to take the next step to look outward.
Well, I want to go back to the statement you made about the employee saying, well, what has my leader done for me? Or they haven't done that for me. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all put our pants on one leg at a time, and you don't know what they're going through. Maybe they need something. They've got their quotas, which falls upon you. And so do a role reversal. And every now and then somebody else is going to need a check-in. And again, it was my pleasure, not you're welcome.
Yeah. And honestly, at the end of everything, no one's going to really remember your quarterly earnings reports. I'm sorry. Nobody's going to nobody's going to remember your KPIs. Like, no one's going to remember how early you retired. Nobody's going to remember what you sold your company for. But they will remember that interaction when they were struggling, that you took the time for them and that you were there for them and that you offered them an act of compassion. Those are the things that stick with people. That's what builds legacies. You don't really build legacy through acquiring and achieving things. You build legacies through contributing. And when you start to see your everyday interactions as opportunities to do that, even if you're in a job you don't like, even if you're in a parking lot outside an airport on a lunch break, even if you're on a virtual meeting that you didn't want to be on. Like, how you show up there is your legacy. And I think we can forget that in the context of all these big flashy goals that we all want to achieve.
You talk about legacy. My listeners and viewers know that I'm a huge country fan. And there's a song by Tim McGraw, and he talks about, would you give or would you take? And it talks about how many lights are in your procession. So how much did you matter, and how many people came to pay their respects to you in terms of how you affected their life? And I thought that it was a little controversial, but I'm like, no, I see this in the positive way about like this person went through life helping, not necessarily helping, but affecting other people in the positive way. And so as you're saying all this, again, my head's spinning all these different things. We got a break in a couple of minutes, but can you share a story from your research that illustrates what it feels like when someone finally realizes that they matter?
Yeah, I mean, one comes to mind. I was in this big auditorium doing work with a big school district. And, this is an example. I've been doing a lot of work with school districts and healthcare recently, because I think people are starting to realize that you can have a job that matters and not experience mattering in your job. Right? For so long that we've told people, like in education, like, oh, you're doing the good work. That's why you got into it, to change lives. But there are people that have this job that matters and they don't experience mattering in their job. And I was in this big auditorium, and I had them all think about a moment when they most felt that they mattered in their work. And there was a woman in the middle, and she was not participating, not writing anything down, not talking, not having it. And I shouldn't have done this, but I did the old call on that person because I do teach classes as well. So I just said, hey, I noticed you didn't write anything down. You didn't really participate. Do you want to share why, or like what's going on? And she said, I've never felt that way. I've never felt that I mattered. This is in front of this whole auditorium with people, teachers, and everything. And I remember there was a teacher stood up and said, what are you talking about? We wouldn't even have classes if it wasn't for you. So this woman was a processor, one of the data processors. She manages like class loads, distributes the students out, does all the back end stuff, does all the paperwork. He's like, we don't have classes because of you. And then there's another person who manages people's transition out. And it's like, our kids wouldn't even get diplomas if it wasn't for you. Wouldn't even know if people were absent if it wasn't for you. It was this phrase, if it wasn't for you, that started coming up. And she was like tearing up in the moment. And she goes, well, I guess jokingly, she was like, I guess I have a moment. Like, it's now. Right? She saw her impact around her. But she had been there for 14 years. But that power of when she saw it, when she felt it, I mean, especially when we went to break that day, it was just completely changed. Her whole nonverbals, her participation, everything changed. I mean, people show up where they matter, right? People commit where they matter. People, when people feel that they matter, they act like they matter. And you saw her completely change. But on the flip side, it shouldn't have taken her 14 years, right? There should have been more signals in her environment. People shouldn't have taken for granted that she knew that she mattered. And that's why we all have that responsibility.
So let's stick with that moment there, her aha moment. As a researcher, as an educator, as somebody who's creating the words mattering and belonging, what's that make you feel like when you are there, when somebody realizes that they matter and it's because of what you're teaching them?
I mean, I don't think it's anything that I'm teaching them. I think it's something that everybody's realizing on their own. I think I'm just asking the questions. One of the questions I do ask, I'll ask everybody here listening, when have you most felt that you matter to someone else? And think about that person right now. What do they do for you? What do they say? And you'll very quickly realize that you're probably not thinking about when you get your direct deposit, or when someone gave you more money, or when you won Employee of the Month from somebody, or, when you're probably thinking of a very small moment when somebody said, hey, if it wasn't for you, showed you the difference that you made. Hey, I noticed that you were struggling. What can I do to help? When somebody named a gift or strength you didn't even know you had, you're not thinking of big actions. In our research, what we find, we're thinking of small interactions. So I think getting people to realize that through those questions is quite powerful, but it's already all there. Everybody already knows it. Our attention gets pulled to the big things. What are we achieving today, acquiring today, doing today? How are we going to get through to the weekend, the 2/7 of our lives?
7s.
And so we forget about those signals.
All right, last question before the break. In other words, Jordan's going to give me a cyber kick on the table. What surprised you most during your research for the power of mattering?
I think I mentioned this already, but I think that what surprised me was that the power of these small moments. Mattering is created in a moment. It's also can be destroyed in a moment. So when we ask people when they most feel that they matter in their life and their work, I still have never heard anything that's quantifiable. So there's no quantifiable information. When I got X amount of dollars, when I did this and I did that, it's all the quality of relationships. And I think what struck me was how accessible it is to create these moments, but how we overlook them. So there's twofold, and I guess we can dig into that later. But how we overlook them and how it's a skill and a practice, but also how accessible it is to create them.
We've been talking to Dr. Zach Mercurio. We'll be right back after a short break. Please stay with us. And we are back. I'm Chris Meek, host of Next Steps Forward. And my special guest today is Dr. Zach Mercurio. Zach is a researcher, speaker, and author whose work focuses on purposeful leadership, meaningful work, and the science of helping people feel seen, heard, valued, and needed. His latest book, The Power of Mattering, explores how we can create cultures where people thrive because they know that they make a difference. So, Zach, the first half of the show was awesome, for lack of a better word. Like I said, I feel like I'm in psych class and sociology class and life lessons 503 or something. Here's a question I meant to ask in the first half. I got way off topic. Do some people spend their lives trying to prove they matter when what they really need is to believe that they already do?
So I think a lot of people can you matter? Can you try to matter too much is a question, but usually the result of that is because of perpetual experiences of not mattering. So it's this sort of double-edged sword. Um, you know, one of the terms that's been thrown around a lot around the last few years is the term narcissist. Like everybody who's difficult is a narcissist. So narcissism, for example, clinical narcissism, about 1.5% of the population or less are actually clinical narcissists. So it's likely like difficult people aren't really difficult, but what's happening is they're acting out in ways to get the attention that they're not getting in other places. So what I think is important to recognize is that when we don't feel that we matter, we either withdraw or we act out in desperation. So one of the outcomes of perpetual experiences of not mattering is acting out in desperation. So, acting out to get significance that you're not getting, like the research on childhood bullying, most childhood bullying behavior is actually an outcome of not mattering. People who don't matter have no locus of control, have never been shown their significance, try to exert that and say, hey, I matter more than you think. So what can happen is that when we're always trying to prove to matter, which means we haven't experienced mattering, is that we can become, hey, I matter more than you think. And we become obsessive and we act out in desperation. We act out in ways that we're surprised that we snapped in that conversation or in that meeting, or We become what others might term egotistical, right? It's all about me. So yeah, when you have those perpetual unmet needs to matter, it can result in those things. So, and that can be unhealthy, and that's the double-edged sword. The good news is the way to do this is to actually show people authentically how they already do matter in small ways. Showing the evidence of their significance and creating those small moments, so we're not always chasing that attention.
Well, it maybe is a good follow-up for that in terms of those small moments. How do we create a greater appreciation in ourselves and others that such a fleeting or small moment can have such a profound impact on someone else's life?
Yeah, the one thing that we have to start doing is overestimating our impact. There's a psychologist named Nick Epley. What he found in one of his landmark studies, he had people write thank you notes to acquaintances, like just to offer gratitude. And then he rated the sender of the thank you notes on how emotionally impactful it would be on the receiver. And then he actually had the receivers rate how emotionally impactful it would have been. And it actually was. This has been replicated, this study, and almost every time everybody underestimates their impact. He's also done studies where they rate people's how much they think a stranger would want to talk to them, and then they have that person go talk to the stranger, and they ask the stranger how meaningful was that, and almost every time people underestimate how interested other people in it are in them and how much other people want to talk to them. So we have what's been called an underestimation bias, a fundamental attribution error. We attribute what's going on with somebody else to them and not to us as part of the environment. So my advice to you would be to overestimate your impact. I mean, now you have an evidence-based path to overestimate your impact on others. I think we're also in an era where our skills to do this have decayed, and we don't even know it. Like, for example, for 25 years, we've been using technology with these little devices I'm holding on my phone to communicate efficiently with one another. And what happens is that now, Chris, if you give me some bad news, I can just send you a sad faced emoji from the comfort of my living room and say, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Chris. Let's catch up next week." But what's happened is 25 years of slowly getting out of these social interactions where I would have had to sit with you, be in the discomfort, seek understanding, demonstrate compassion. Every time we lose the opportunity to engage in that moment, we lose the skill to do it. Psychologists call it social skill decay. So a skill can decay within about 8 days of not using it. So think about how many times collectively we have all gotten out of the social repetitions to hone our skills to see, hear, and value one another through efficiently communicating. And I mean, there's people out there that haven't had to show compassion to another person in real time in 5 years. So we're losing the skills to do it as well, which compounds our underestimation bias. And then, our attention spans have been dwindling. Our environment makes it harder to pay attention to the person in front of us. We've lost the ability to do that. So overestimate your impact. Focus on relearning the skills to see, hear, and value and need other people, because we all are facing a skills deficit in this area. We don't even know it's happening. And then we have to relearn how to pay attention to others.
We talk about things dwindling in terms of attention. I heard something recently where just a song on the radio, it used to be like 4 minutes, 4.5 minutes. Now it cannot be any longer than 3:32.
Yeah.
3 minutes, 32 seconds.
Yep.
And there's something else, like whether it's a TikTok video or something on YouTube, like you've got that person's attention for like, I'll say 20 seconds. It's less than 30 seconds. Otherwise, you've lost them.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that ties to my next question here. We're talking earlier about how connected the modern world is. You were showing your phone there and how we're not talking to people. We're sending sad face emojis or exclamation points or the middle finger or whatever it is. But one of the great paradoxes is that we're more connected technologically than ever before, but many people feel lonelier and more isolated than ever.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Yeah, I mean, think about this. I mean, there's 38 million people on the workplace messaging app Slack right now as we talk, sending messages back and forth. The average U.S. adult sends 30 to 40 text-based messages to peers a day. That's a lot more connection than a day. 30 to 40 text-based on, think about it, Zoom, email, chats, whatever workplace platform you have, text messages. About 30 to 40 on average, is probably a little bit higher. Yet people report that they're lonelier than ever. 1 in 5 people experience chronic feelings of loneliness. And I think that what we've gotten wrong about loneliness is that loneliness is not the outcome of being alone. The research is really key here. The predictor of loneliness is not lack of social contact. The predictor of loneliness is a lack of perceived social value to others. So if you've been listening and you're still with us here, you may be connecting the dots that it's not the quantity of interactions that matter, it's the quality. There's even in the workplace psychology research, there's some research that shows the more meetings you have, the more lonely you're likely to feel. Because the quantity of interactions going up, but you're not getting as quality interpersonal interactions with others if you're just sitting in meetings all the time and not having those one-on-one interactions. So rebuilding these quality interactions is imperative to healing this loneliness epidemic. But what we hear is loneliness epidemic, connect more, join a club, go out, do this, find a hobby with other people. Or, we have social psychologists telling us to put down our phones. Putting down your phones will not heal your disconnection, right? What you know how to do when you put down your phones will. So we have to relearn these skills, re-practice these skills, get ourselves, our kids, others, our employees into more social situations in which they can hone these skills and relearn them to combat this.
Well, great segue. It's like you're reading my script here in terms of, putting the phone down, getting reconnected. There are people who have hundreds and even thousands of Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram connections, yet they still feel profoundly alone. Should we quit calling these digital links connections and start calling them and recognizing them as something else altogether?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to recognize them as, but I would say we could recognize them as lower quality connections. There's a researcher named Jane Dutton. She had this term for these small connections that actually matter, which are high quality connections. I think we can call them low quality connections. Now, this is not to say that you can't digitally or use technology to create a sense of mattering for other people. Again, it comes down to the quality of interactions that we've had. I've seen many people who are using the chat on a sidebar in a meeting to affirm somebody in real time. Like, hey, I loved the way you said that, that was amazing. So you can use technology in a way that affirms people. The problem is how we've used these social connections is we've quantified them to signal our worth. So one of the things that's really hard right now is that the competing signals that we get in terms of how we matter, we look for the louder signals like likes, shares, things that can be quantified. But it's almost always those smaller, quieter signals that come from relationships in which we feel valued and that we're adding value that actually form a sense of mattering. But our environment around us wants to put our attention all into the likes and shares and follower accounts. So we don't pay attention to the signals all around us every day that are giving us that evidence that we're significant and that we're adding value from our relationships that are really meaningful. They may not be as flashy. So we also have to recalibrate our attention. But yes, I mean, I think they're lower quality interactions if they don't help you feel valued and help you know how you add value.
So I want to go back to your low quality connections. So what you're saying is when I joined Facebook like 15 years ago and Giselle accepted my friend request, like we're not really friends?
You may not be friends, Chris. You may be acquaintances or maybe a symbolic number that you have put in your head that, wow, somebody else likes me. But you're not getting that real-time evidence of your significance. You're not having someone check in on you, truly see you, truly hear you, say those words like if it wasn't for you. You're not having someone give you critique or constructive critique because they care about you and they've seen your life and they're invested in your life. Those are the high-quality connections that create a sense of mattering. There's no shortcut either. Hurry and true care can't coexist. I mean, you can't. There's no way to algorithmically make mattering more efficient. The currency of feeling that you matter is always time and attention. Right? There's no shortcut.
Giselle, I know you're listening because you've liked our show in the past, so DM me and we'll get this squared away. Just don't tell my wife. No, I'm kidding. So, Zach, I've obviously been pretty hard on technology and social media by focusing on their shortcomings. But what, if any, are the positives? Are there ways that social media has made us better at connecting with others and showing them that they matter?
Yeah, absolutely. When I think it's just real, authentic, and it has those three elements that we found create moments of mattering embedded in them. I mean, we found that when people feel that they matter, there are three things going on. They feel noticed, They feel seen and heard. 2, they feel affirmed. They are able to see how their unique gifts make a unique difference. And then 3, they feel needed. They feel relied on. They feel indispensable. So those 3 components are the architecture of mattering: feeling noticed, affirmed, and needed. That can happen virtually. For example, when someone on social media uses social media to track down somebody and highlight how they made a difference for them. And I've seen that a lot, like where somebody was like, social media help, let's track down this person who left this note on my car, right? And let's highlight the good they're doing. I think that that's what connects people, right? Social media is really good at also like removing the boundaries of space and time. So we can visually document someone making a difference. There's a reason why we love those videos that come across our Instagram feeds of people helping other people when nothing's in it for them. We crave that as much as the other awful stuff that's shown to us, right? We just don't get shown it as often. But the reason why we crave it is we have that instinct to feel that we matter. So when we see someone else adding value, helping another person, having that person feel valued, we're actually reminded of the importance of mattering. So there is content that can reinforce significance. There are connections that can be a high quality that can connect people, for example, who are going through similar things. I see a lot of this in the chronic illness community, or people going through a terminal illness who have been connected because of social media, and they're able to, it's a gateway to positive relationships. So there's a lot of good. The question is, are you using social media for efficient communication and shallow symbols of significance and low quality interactions, or are you using social media to make sure people around you feel noticed, affirmed, and needed?
So use its power for good, not evil.
Yeah. Technology's rarely been the problem ever in human history. It's all about how humans use it.
What does purpose give us that happiness doesn't?
Well, happiness is a state, and usually it's a state of pleasure that's tied to what you're doing. So I can go to a concert and be happy in the moment and experiencing this state of pleasure, but it's fleeting. It ends when the concert ends. Purpose endures. Like you can, you may not be able to check off everything on your to-do list today, but you can always contribute to someone else today. Like you can always contribute. So that sense of contribution, that sense of transcendence to something else is bigger. It's outside of ourselves. So it pulls us along, and it lasts much longer than the temporary state of happiness, which usually comes and goes depending on where we are and what we're doing. Purpose endures. And usually that having that sense of purpose, that adding value, that contribution, it's never finished. You know, would you ever be like, oh, I've contributed enough and solved enough people's problems, right? So I'm done.
I'm done. I'm out.
Right. But we can always be like, I achieved this goal. I achieved that goal. There's a psychologist, Jennifer Crocker. She studied people who, I call it like your goal portfolio. She studied people that have what are called self-image goals. I don't like the name of that, but a self-image goal is like a resume virtue. It's like, I'm doing this to improve myself. I'm doing this to get more money. I'm doing this to get something for myself. A contribution goal is solving another person's problem or contributing in some way to somebody else or to society for another problem. And she studied people over time. And people who have more self-image goals tend to be more anxious, more burned out, more fearful, and have worse mental health than people with more contribution goals. It's not that those self-image goals aren't important, but it's when people have more of the contribution goals mixed in with those self-image goals, she calls them, they're much less likely to be anxious, much more likely to have better relationships. And why is that? Because your identity isn't tied to something you can achieve or can't achieve. And here's the problem. If you achieve it or you don't achieve it, you're actually at the same psychological space. What now? It's called the destination addiction or the arrival fallacy in psychology, that if I arrive at this place, then I'll be happy. If you have a lot of if-then arguments in your life, you're probably pursuing the temporary state of happiness and not the enduring state of purpose.
Enduring state of purpose. I love that. You know, you've also written The Invisible Leader. And before I forget, where can people find your book, The Invisible Leader and the Power of Mattering?
Yeah, you can go on my website, zachmercurio.com, and then they're available at any really book retailer that you can find. But there's I want to just point out on the website, there's a learn tab. It's mattering and then purpose. And there's just a bunch of you don't even need to enter your email. It's free resources, assessments. If you want to even just know how to give a better thank you to someone to create a moment of mattering, there's a template and prompt there. You can download them, use them right now. So go check that out.
And again, the website is
www.zachmercurio.com, and it's ZACH, not ZACK. I know that's a big point of clarification for a lot of people.
So your first book, The Invisible Leader, why did you choose the word invisible? Is an invisible leader someone without formal authority?
The invisible leader isn't a person. It's a purpose. Mary Parker Follett, a management scholar in the 1920s, said it really well. She said, leaders and followers are both following the invisible leader, the common purpose. Right? There's some pulling force that pulls us all together. Right? There's some pulling force, some bigger contribution, some bigger calling we have, some bigger problem we want to solve that actually is the force, the energizer, not the leader, not a person. But leaders tend to be people who let that purpose take over. And they are the conduit between that bigger purpose, how people are adding value, and bringing that back to the individual and helping them see how they're adding value. And usually they do it by helping them feel valued. That's why I wish I had written my second book before the first one. I guess it's like a prequel, because you can't really find your purpose or see your invisible leader of your life, your contribution, if you don't first believe you're worthy of contributing. It's very hard to find your purpose if you don't feel worthy of having the one, if you don't feel that you matter. And so these things work together, that experience of mattering, doing it for other people, helps them see how they add value, can connect them to that bigger pulling force.
We've got about 60 seconds left. If everyone in the audience made one person feel seen, heard, valued and needed this week, what ripple effect do you believe they could create?
Yeah, one, I mean, you could keep someone going, right? You could keep someone going. There's a reason, right? And especially here in the US, where our national suicide hotline is named You Matter. There's a reason. Because one of the things that we find is that people who are struggling, they tend not to tell you, but they feel this sense of nobody would miss me if I was gone. Well, you can be the reason that shows them how they matter. And I've seen that repeatedly, and shows them that they're needed. And I've seen that repeatedly in our research. Number two, when people feel that they matter, they act like they matter. People show up, people commit, people give their ideas in schools and communities and in society. If we want people to engage in what's happening, if we want people's ideas, if we want innovation, people have to believe their voice is significant again. They have to feel seen, heard, valued, and needed. And then the best reason to do this is that they'll likely do it for someone else.
Pay it forward.
Yep.
Dr. Zach Mercurio, and that's Zach, CH, not CK. ZachMercurio.com is the website. Author of The Power of Mattering and The Invisible Leader. Thank you so much for being with us today. I had a lot of fun. I learned a ton. Eric, my producer, sorry I got through half the questions, so I have to have you back again.
That sounds good. It's probably my fault too, but thanks, Chris.
Not at all. It was fascinating, so I really appreciate your time. I'm Chris Meek. We're out of time. We'll see you next week. Same time, same place. Until then, stay safe.